Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by the dynamic Joe Fordyce. And Joe, the Flyers are back from the Four Nations break. They picked up a 6-3 win over the Oilers in their first game back, and they also got a win before going into the break. Before the break, Joe, John Tortorella said he really wants the Flyers to try to make a run. He thinks there's a lot of 500 teams in the league, and he believes if you go on one run, you're right back in the thick of things. Do you think this team has what's needed to make it run and to have some meaningful games here down the stretch?
Well, the there's a lot of 500 teams in the league. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. I mean, you just look at the Eastern Conference standings from the wild card down, and everybody's pretty similar. Everybody's in striking distance, and yeah, you have a lot of teams that are hovering right around that hockey 500, including the Flyers. Now, the team that played Saturday, the one that's healthy and the one that really took it to the Oilers um, for a good, I would say 65, 70% of that game, that team can make a run. Um, now, what you saw Saturday, though, was a team that was fresh. A number of players that hadn't played in a while. Owen Tippett hadn't played in almost a month. Matvei Michkov, everybody talked that he needed a break, and he came out looking fresh. Are they going to look that fresh when you start playing 4 games in 6 nights and those sort of that you get back into the thick of the schedule? That remains to be seen. But I don't see when you see how they've played against the other teams that are in this mix of the teams that are all around each other in the standings. I mean, why not them? I think it's going to be, as you said, who gets hot, who has the hot goaltender, um, and whose best players step up at the biggest times. That's going to be the team that makes the run and threatens or even gets one of those wild card spots. So, yeah, I think they can make a run. And I think when you listen to the guys talk this week, particularly since the Edmonton game, I think they're thinking that too. It seems to be the theme amongst this team is, nobody's ready to talk about dealing pieces at the deadline, and even though they've already made one big deal to deal pieces, but um, I don't see unless things go the other way. I mean, I think that Edmonton game could serve as a turning point. I think it served as a turning point in their minds for sure, though.
And I understand what John Tortorella is saying. I do think there's a ton of teams in the ballpark of just 500 hockey, just okay teams that are kind of win one, lose one. And it really will be a matter of which team gets hot at the right time and kind of separates itself. And I do think the Flyers were dealing with a lot of injuries on top of that trade, and then they didn't see the 2 players in return for, like, 3 or 4 games. So they were dealing with injury, and then they really didn't get any return on that deal, and it really put them in a tough spot where the season kinda spiraled a little bit and really made you think, "Wow, this is very much about next season," and it still could be, but I think we maybe underestimated just how talented Andrei Kuzmenko is. In his first 2 games, he has looked very good. He's a guy that had a 39-goal rookie season, so there is talent there, and perhaps he jumps in and gives them a real lift. And then Jacob Pelletier made his his Flyers debut in this win over the Oilers, so they got another body there. So in this game back, Joe, from the break, they had 5 guys that were not in the previous game before the break. They had Ryan Poehling, Rasmus Ristolainen, Igor Zamula, Owen Tippett, and Jacob Pelletier. So they had reinforcements, and I think we saw what a healthier team can do. A team that has some confidence, has some more energy, and maybe they'll have nothing to lose down the stretch. Now, Joe, I will say this, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. I think the biggest reasons to be pessimistic about them really going on a run is one, they probably have to jump about 6 teams to get one of these wild card spots. And two, we haven't seen them go on a run. They haven't won more than 3 games in a row in the last calendar year. The last time they won four straight, more than 3 in a row, was early February of last year. So it's been over a year, just over a year since they've won more than 3 in a row. It's one of those things where I'm gonna have to see it to believe it first.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things when you have that many teams in the mix, somebody's getting points every night because
Mhm.
the way the NHL schedule's built, it's mostly interconference and division games at this portion of the schedule. So while somebody's losing, someone's beating them and getting those points. And then you have the dreaded 3-point game where somebody gets two and somebody gets one. The Flyers are behind the eight ball a little bit because their regulation win total is very low. I mean, it's one of the lowest in the NHL, despite the fact that they're where their points are. Um, so I think that's going to be difficult. So I agree with you. That's another hurdle. That's almost like having to overcome another team is the regulation win part and the lack of holding any of those tiebreaker scenarios. But the I think when you look at the teams, one, they're pretty much forced to win all the head-to-head games with the teams that are ahead of them. Like if you're going to lose a game, it's got to be like lose to Seattle or something like that. I'm just thinking of one of the games coming up. You can't afford to lose games to the Rangers, the Red Wings, the teams that are around there, Pittsburgh, which they have two of them coming up here. You can't lose to those teams because then those become 4-point games that really knock you down a peg. And the the Flyers have to win some of the Flyers have to start winning games in regulation. They just have to. Um, so it's a couple more hurdles, and it's not going to be easy. But the idea that can they get in the mix, I think they can.
Yeah.
But I do think it'll be difficult. And there is the trade deadline factor where we've already seen Danny Briere is not going, if he gets a deal he can't refuse, he's not going to say, oh, well, we might be able to get that last playoff spot and not make the deal. So there's that factor too. And I know fans don't want to hear that. And maybe they're getting a little tired, but they've made it clear that getting the last wild card spot does not supersede the plan going forward with the future, with their cap space opening up and all of the draft capital they have coming up for this June's draft. And so, one way or another, that's going to be a storyline going forward, whether they don't make a trade or whether they do. And if they do make a trade, it's probably going to be somebody of consequence that affects their right now, just like it did with Farabee and Frost.
That could arguably be the biggest obstacle for them as well, is the trade deadline. Not only because if they make a trade, they subtract from their roster, it's gonna hurt them on ice, but I think the locker room is gonna take another shot mentally. We definitely know how much the locker room liked Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost, and if they make another trade, I think the locker room has to get past the whole, "Well, another trade for the rebuild, and, are we running out of time here and we're losing guys on top of it?" So, I
And if you
definitely
get current NHLers, they need to come. They need to be ready to play right away.
yeah,
Not,
they
I'm not suggesting Kuzmenko and Peltier weren't ready to play, but
yeah.
the visa issues and all caused them not to play. Which, as you mentioned, it felt like there was a lull, a dark cloud over the team that whole week. And even when you heard guys talk about it, um, Garnet Hathaway, who's very methodical the way he speaks. Even he that week, he's like, we don't have those guys here, so we really haven't been able to see it. Like you had players acknowledging unsolicited the difficulty of that week. So if they make a trade and get any players back, let's hope they're ready to play, be in the lineup, the next game or within the vicinity of the trade.
Yeah, because there's something to be said about fresh blood, new life, but you got to actually have the players that feel that feeling. And the Flyers were without that when Kuzmenko and Peltier were trying to get past the visa issues and get here. And it was a challenging stretch for the team, and I think they felt it. But now I think they have some new life because of the break, and I really just think it would be real positive if they do play meaningful games down the stretch. It doesn't mean they have to get into the playoffs. Doesn't mean they have to be like a point or two out. But if the games matter, I think there's something to be said for that, and I think the Flyers can benefit from that, and they'll get better evaluations. I think on a lot of guys, including Andrei Kuzmenko. Joe, as we know, he's very much in audition mode. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. The Flyers have no long-term commitment to him, but who knows? If he opens some eyes and kind of shows you that high-end scoring ability, maybe the Flyers will think about re-signing him and get him here where he feels comfortable and he likes it here and he wants to sign here. Have you been impressed by Kuzmenko in his first 2 games?
Well, the creativity offensively that we heard about certainly has been on display. And he seems kind of like a guy who fits very well into this locker room. I don't think any of those things are the things that anyone had any concerns about. Um, More concerning is when you look and you say, okay, he's been on 3 teams and he's been traded by the same team twice. And you start to wonder, okay, what is causing this? And maybe he doesn't see eye to eye with coaches sometimes or anything like that. We've not seen any of that yet. With that said, he's played 2 games. So, but from what we've seen so far, and of course, he's caught the eye of John Tortorella. We've heard him talk about him. And it's added a dynamic component to the power play and sort of the offensive attack is a guy with that skill set. Now, I the thing with him is you assume shortcomings in his game are going to be on the defensive side. And that's not exactly the player that doesn't always vibe with this head coach. So I'm interested to see, although John Tortorella did say after last game, I made a correction. And then the next time out and later in the game, I see him right away make the correction. And he's so hopefully that continues. The Flyers hope that continues. And again, he's in audition mode. So um you can bet this team has their eyes on him because regardless of how he finishes the season, the Flyers can probably get him back at a pretty a team friendly deal, I would think, um, if they choose to go in that direction.
I think I definitely underestimated how talented he was. I think when the trade happened, I'm looking at all the cap related reasons for why they made that trade, and I'm thinking, oh, here comes a guy with some pedigree in terms of he had that great rookie year, and then he kind of has been in and out of the lineup on a couple different teams. He's just here for a brief period, and that could be the case. It could be that he was just here for a couple of months, and then he'll sign elsewhere in the offseason. But I saw him on the ice, and you can tell he is talented. He is gifted offensively, and you could probably argue he's more gifted offensively than Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost. Now, Frost is a center. He plays a premium position. He's younger. Farabee's probably a better 200-foot player. He's probably more sound the full length of the rink. But Kuzmenko, there's definitely some real big time scoring upside there. I mean, you don't do what he did in his rookie year, 39 goals, 70 plus points. That's not a fluke. That happened because he can score the puck a little bit. So watching him just makes me think, okay, maybe he gets hot, and maybe the Flyers build around that. They get a real lift there, and maybe they do make things interesting down the stretch. But so far, so good with Kuzmenko. I think it's great that apparently Tortorella thinks he's very coachable. I do think it's kind of the honeymoon phase right now, where player and coach typically get along those first couple weeks, and we'll see where it goes. But so far, I think Kuzmenko's come in and really shown something, and that's only a positive.
Yeah, and I do think in today's NHL, sometimes it's okay to have guys that are there just to create offense.
Yeah.
Not everyone is a 200-foot player. I mean, I understand John Tortorella wants guys to play sound the entire rink, but there are certain guys that just don't do it. And sometimes you need those guys. Um, as I mentioned when we talked about Matvei Michkov, I don't think anybody is complaining that Alex Ovechkin virtually does not skate when the puck is not in the offensive zone. And you watch as I have, you watch it in person. When Ovechkin play, I mean, he barely takes a stride when it's not to drive some sort of offensive play. And no, I'm not comparing Ovechkin to these two players. I'm just saying sometimes it's okay to have players that are on the ice to drive offense and not much else.
No, I agree, and you see what Kuzmenko did on the power play for his goal against Edmonton, like, that was real just talent-based stuff. I mean, the great pass to Konechny, then the give and go, and he scores there. And I watched it. I'm like, man, they have needed that on the power play for a while now. And maybe this guy can do that consistently enough where they get a real shot in the arm in an area of need. And
And
that
how about the secondary assist he had against Pittsburgh the game before? The little play against the boards. He knew exactly where, as the puck was rimming around the boards, he knows exactly, and it's just that little one-touch
yeah,
pass to the middle of the ice that sets the Flyers on a rush up the ice. I mean, those are instinctual offensive plays
yeah.
that, again, like you said, I'm not certain that's in Farabee or Frost's arsenal. Frost, obviously being a center, likely wouldn't be in that spot to make that pass. But like Farabee, I don't know. That's more of a guy that's a guy that has next level offensive instincts, and I think that's really a breath of fresh air for this team because they've gone through lulls of scoring this year for sure.
And Kuzmenko's an older guy. He's 29, so he's been around a little bit. He's played at a high level over in Russia, and you can just tell, like, he is gifted offensively, and if the Flyers can see that offense the rest of the way here, perhaps the games get a little more interesting and meaningful, and perhaps he gives the reason for the Flyers to maybe think about bringing him back next year. But we'll see where it all goes. It's only 2 games in, but so far, I think Kuzmenko has really opened some eyes. And Joe, one guy that really opened eyes, and maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but given he had started to struggle a little bit before the break, and that was Matvei Michkov. It looked like he was shot out of a cannon against the Oilers. He was just fantastic offensively. Um, just his playmaking and what he did on the line with Sean Couturier and Owen Tippett. It was fun to watch. It was a treat to watch, and it had you thinking, man, maybe he'll close this season with force. Like it looks like he got that break that he needed, and he's found his legs again. What did you think?
Yeah, and maybe this is a step in his career.
Mm,
Almost, we always talk about guys that are rookies that don't play like rookies. Maybe he's taken that doesn't play like a rookie step
mm.
because everything we saw prior to that looked like a guy that was a rookie and that was struggling maybe with the schedule and the sort of energy that it takes to push through an NHL schedule. But as you said, I mean, shot out of a cannon, the most notable player on the ice. During the time when Owen Tippett was out, we heard John Tortorella reference that Mishkov needed guys to play off of him. And he certainly found that with Tippett on Saturday. And, what I liked is that play, the assist to Tip on Tippett's goal, where he kind of backhand saucer passed it to the far post. I mean, I don't know that anybody else on the team can even make that play.
Mhm.
Um, and it was great to see. You see the potential there and the skill, and you just hope that this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg for what the rest of this season and obviously going forward. This is what the Flyers want to see because you do see how he can kind of as much as a winger can take over a game. He And another thing that's crazy to think is with the guys that were on the other side in that game, to be the most noticeable player on the ice
Yeah.
amongst that group of talent was something. And I think Mishkov was the most noticeable player in that game on Saturday.
And you really do think how much better he is when he's playing with certain line mates, and people have often said, like, he needs a high-end center eventually, and who's on his opposite wing, and Tippett, to me, you could see the power and the speed that he offered Mishkov, like, and then Couturier's got some real smarts, so these are guys that I think find open ice, they find areas, and Tippett's speed, I think, gives Mishkov something to play off of, that line just really clicked, and I think Mishkov had people complimenting him very well. And they seem to know now what Mishkov's about. Like he's going to make the play that you don't think is there, so be ready for it. And they were. And absolutely, Joe, to stand out in a game like that, where guys like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are on the opposite side, it was fun to watch. And it definitely tells me he gets up for moments. We've seen him do this against Alex Ovechkin. We've seen him do it against McDavid twice now, where he had big games. It definitely seems like he gets up for moments, and that to me is a real good, promising sign of a guy that like wants to be a star, has star qualities for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked about Saturday was there wasn't a lot of power play opportunities, but I liked seeing Mishkov down below the goal line on the power play, kind of almost running the power play inversely, like from behind the net. I think that might be they've I think the Flyers will find some success there. Mishkov's pretty dynamic with the puck, and I think that view close to the net with the threat he brings from being around the net in the first place, I think him kind of running things or being a 1A to the quarterback of the power play from behind the net could really wind up in some success. So I'm hoping to see that again. If they get more opportunities, they of course didn't. There was not a lot of penalties in that game the other day. So, but yeah, I'd like to see a little more of that and see what the Flyers have there.
Absolutely. And another intriguing matchup for the Flyers coming up. They got Connor McDavid in the first game back, and now they'll get Sidney Crosby on Tuesday at the Wells Fargo Center. Joe Fordyce will have Flyers pre and post game live for you on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Joe, thanks so much as always. Great to see you. Great to chat with you. A big thank you to Ben Berry, our podcast producer and guru. And Flyers fans, as always, thank you so much for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, please rate and listen. And we can't wait to talk to you next time.